What's going on? And welcome to the Prop Queen Pod. I am very clearly not Ariel Epstein. I am Tom Vecchio. We are going to be jumping into all things sports for today. As Matt was hosting the other day, I am hosting today and tomorrow while Ariel is away. So we have a ton to get to. We have a full NHL slate for tonight. There's only one NBA game tonight. There's a full slate of NBA tomorrow. But of course, we have Thursday night football tonight. So it's really just going to be business as usual. I will say there won't be any guests either today or tomorrow. It's just going to be me solo hosting for the next 30 to 60 minutes. And we'll run through all of Thursday night football. I think we're in for a good game tonight. I'm not going to say it's going to be overwhelmingly amazing. It's clearly one-sided with the Broncos as large favorites, but we'll talk through all this. We'll talk through the Thursday game tonight. Again, the one NBA game tonight. We know that Kawhi's out. We know that Harden is out. We have a full slate of NHL. Tomorrow, we'll have a full NBA slate to get through, and then we'll talk about all of the Sunday games for the NFL right off the top. As I've told Ariel before, I'm not your guy for college football or college basketball. So, I know we are in, some big weekends for college football. We're also right at the start of college basketball season. It's not really my thing. There are plenty of sources that you can find. She's always had on plenty of guests to bring you great college football and or college basketball information. That's not me. So we'll dive into Thursday night football. I'll answer your questions. I'll tell you what I like, what I don't like, and we'll go from there. And then tomorrow, really want to focus on NBA Cup games tomorrow. And then we will look at all of NFL, the entire Sunday slate. So Mark is already asking, how do I like the Bears for a survivor pick this week? Certainly don't mind it. We can talk about plenty of that tomorrow. We can dive into the entire NFL slate tomorrow. Off the top, I certainly don't mind it. The Giants are just devoid of talent right now. And to see them overcome the offense that the Bears have would surprise me. So, Joe Rodriguez is saying, Tom V, that's right, I am hosting today and tomorrow. So I certainly don't mind the Bears. And as I always ask, or the response that I would have in do I like the Bears is, who else do you have available? Like, what path have you taken to get this far into week 10 and have a survivor pick still alive? First of all, 9 straight weeks of getting a correct pick. That's awesome. The fact that you've gotten to week 10 and you are alive with the Bears, that's great. I would ask, who else do you have available? That's really always the question that I want to know. In a bubble, I could say, yes, I do believe the Bears as 4.5-point favorites should be able to beat the Giants when they're missing a lot of their best players. And, this is obviously going back weeks at this point with Neighbors not there. Now it's Cam Scatterbo and all these players are missing. So yes, we should be able to trust the Bears, but you have Indy, Detroit, Buffalo, and KC. Okay. So Buffalo also looks like a good option. The question becomes do you have it pre-planned where you're saying, I like this team here, this team this week, and you're trying to set yourself up to get an easy spot. I will say if you have Detroit alive, maybe coming into the season, again, if you were planning this path, you weren't expecting Detroit to be in this spot where Detroit on the road versus a healthy Commanders team with Jaden Daniels is a different story than what we have currently with the Commanders with no Daniels and Detroit as 8.5-point road favorites. So you may not have planned to have Detroit or would be interested in Detroit, this week just because they'd be playing on the road in the Commanders, but it's a different story this week. So that's why I would be asking now. Let me just send this tweet real quick. Hosting today and tomorrow. All right. So that's the one thing I would say. But yes, Uncle Ted is saying, save Detroit for a home game. Absolutely. They are far better at home than they are on the road. Goff has bad home road splits. He also has bad home road, especially when road is outdoor, especially since he went to Detroit. But let's get into tonight's game. Currently in Denver, if you are, just perusing around Twitter looking for information, you will see that a lot of people are reporting that there are really high winds in Denver today. And, according to Kevin Roth, who's the meteorologist over at Roto-Grinders, has been, doing plenty of meteorology reports across betting and fantasy for years at this point. He is saying that the winds currently in Denver will die down as we get to game time. So there are wind gusts now. There can be some later, but it will be significantly less. So that may point us to a bit of a running game tonight, which I certainly have some angles I'd like to attack. So we're dealing with an 8.5 over under today, 42.5 total. This line has been bet up. It was 6.5, 7.5. We now see the Broncos at 8.5, was 43.5. It's down to 42.5. Some of the news coming into this game about the Raiders would be obviously that they traded Jacoby Myers to Jacksonville. And really what we get from their receiving core outside of Brock Bowers, who returned last week in an absolutely explosive performance, albeit in a loss, what we get as the secondary receiving options for the Raiders is going to be really interesting. We know that prior to last week's game, they signed Tyler Lockett, who was released from Tennessee, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and the connection that Tyler Lockett has with Geno Smith, the Raiders quarterback, is certainly there. However, the Raiders also have some young receivers that they should realistically look to develop. Now, in two wide receiver sets, it will, of course, be Trey Tucker, who is, I guess, their de facto number one receiver right now. He played on 97% of the snaps last week. Jacoby Myers was at 89%, and then Tyler Lockett was at 30%. Those were the only three wide receivers to see the field last week. Obviously, Jacoby is now gone. Jack Besh, one of their rookies, was active last week, but he did not play any offensive snaps. They have worked him in just a little bit. Dante Thornton Jr. was also inactive last week, did not play. We saw Jack Besh earlier today. His line was 11.5 for receiving yards, and that number has been bet up, at least over on FanDuel. That number has been bet up to 15.5. And the same thing can be said about Tyler Lockett. Earlier, Lockett was sitting at that number actually has been bet down, 16.5. So Tyler Lockett's now at 15.5. He has been bet down. Jack Besh has been bet up. Also, we'll probably see Michael Mayer, the backup tight end, who stepped into a decent role when Brock Bowers was out. They'll probably be running two wide receiver sets. Yes, as Uncle Ted is saying, they're going to feed Bowers. Really, what we saw from him last week was him just picking up where he left off of last season, which is dominant performance, always looking to go over his yards. To see him have fewer than 8 targets for this game or any other game for the rest of the season would be shocking. Given the lack of talent and overall skill that the Raiders have in terms of their wide receivers, Bowers should be maintaining a 30+% target share on a week in and week out basis. And Kay is saying with Mims out, Franklin should eat. And yes, that is what we saw a bit last week. Marvin Mims is still out this week. Pat Surtain, their top corner, is also out this week. We should be seeing, I would say, a bit of a bounce back game for Courtland Sutton as well. Courtland Sutton saw plenty of Derek Stingley Jr. last week when they were at the Texans in an absolutely disgusting game. Two good defenses, as what you would expect. But Sutton is really in for a bounce back game. And that's got to be one of my favorite bets this week. Or at least I should say for this game is going to be Courtland Sutton over 54.5 yards, has been bet up to 55, whatever it might be. I think he's in for a huge game. Saying that Pat Bryant's going to eat, it really comes down to what you are expecting in terms of the separation between Courtland Sutton up top and then who are the next options, because Troy Franklin is, Earl is saying, yes, I do like Courtland Sutton over 54, 55, whatever it is. I am a big proponent of Courtland Sutton. Last week, we saw Troy Franklin step up and play a big role in their offense. And obviously some of this is due to the fact that, again, Derek Stingley Jr. from Houston was shadowing Courtland Sutton for at least a good portion of the game. It wasn't every single route that Courtland Sutton ran, but it was a good portion for Sutton. So Troy Franklin stepped up and had a really big role and a good role overall, just when you're looking at the targets. So I like Troy Franklin, but to the point of, if Pat Bryant is going to be eating, that's really a soft line. And I forget who said it before, but Pat Bryant over long reception of 12.5. That is certainly a spot that we should be seeing. So I like Cortland Sutton over. Pat Bryant is certainly in play. The Troy Franklin number, I'm not saying I don't like it. I just think the number is super accurate at 46.5. So I don't want to bet into that. I think Cortland Sutton could very easily go for 60 plus. If Troy Franklin gets to his number, I'm not going to be surprised, especially against this defense, but it's just not my favorite. I'd rather go Cortland Sutton and then drop down and take someone like Pat Bryant. So start off with Cortland Sutton over 54.5, over 55.5. That's what I certainly like. When we're looking at the passing market overall, I should say the passing props today overall, Geno Smith, his number this morning was 212.5. That number has been bet up. It's at 215.5. The Bo Nix number is the same at 220.5. The rushing market is really interesting because J.K. Dobbins is only 70.5. R.J. Harvey, the rookie, is at 22.5. And if they are 8.5-point favorites, we should be seeing the Broncos out in front, and they should be leading and able to control the clock. It's apparent that Denver never likes to make things easy on themselves, where they are magicians in the fourth quarter, pulling a rabbit out of a hat constantly to come away with wins. But the level of production in the first half or first three quarters sometimes is really, really sporadic. You like to see them get that under control, especially at a home game in a short week. It's a divisional matchup. They should go about things hopefully very rationally today and move the ball down the field and quote unquote take care of business. Earl's asking, what about Tucker over 48.5? This is referring to Trey Tucker. I'm seeing 46.5, at least over on FanDuel right now. He should be stepping into wide receiver one duties for the Raiders, with Kobe Myers being traded again. Trey Tucker has been that guy for them all season, played on 97% of the snaps last week. I will say, just looking back at Trey Tucker's game log, and if you've been betting on him, if you have him on your fantasy teams, whatever it might be, we do know that there's some very clear, boom or bust potential for Trey Tucker, that there are some games that he could have 60 yards on 2 catches, and there are some games when he has, 1 catch for 10 yards, 2 catches for, 18 yards or something like that. So I don't mind it because the Raiders are in a passing game script, or they are expected to be as 8.5-point underdogs. But I will say it's not my favorite bet. I'd rather just lean into Brock Bowers, knowing that they should be getting him the ball when it's all said and done. So again, the wind should be dying down today for today's game a little bit later. Jack Bech over 1.5 catches. Frankly, I would play Jack Bech receiving yards before receptions. That's just the way I like to go about things. As I've always said time and time again, a player can literally have 99 yards on 1 catch. A player can't have 2 catches on 1 catch, right? Like he could go over his receiving prop, catch a ball. I don't want to get hurt, but he'll never go over his receptions prop on 1 catch. It sounds a little silly, but I always prefer to play yards ahead of receptions. That's just me. If it's 1.5, let's just see, is there juice on it? It's -102. I think that's fine. If there's any time to buy low on a prop like that, it would be now. Because if Jack Bech does step up and play an elevated role, that number's going to be 2.5. It's going to be 3.5, especially if they don't utilize Tyler Lockett a lot. So that's where I would be looking overall. Bowers is 68.5 on FanDuel. I think it's a good number. That's where his number should be. Obviously, the matchup is something that we don't love, but Brock Bowers should be seeing a roughly 30% target share this week and every week going forward, and that should get him to 70 yards. So seeing 12 targets, 9 catches, for 70-plus yards, that's what we should be expecting from Brock Bowers, especially if they are in this passing game script. He looked fantastic last week. Not worried about the injury. Kay's asking, who do I like to score a TD? The TD market, pretty straightforward, as you would expect. We see their lead running back, J.K. Dobbins. He's at +100. It was -105 a little bit earlier today. Genty, the lead back for the Raiders, is +130. Sutton, +145. I will say, objectively, I like Cortland Sutton at +145, but I will be using Troy Franklin for the FanDuel TD Jackpot promo. That's where I will be using that. Will be on Troy Franklin. If we look back to last week, and again, this is a 1-game sample size, and yes, RJ Harvey is scoring a ton of touchdowns over this recent stretch. I would look to play Troy Franklin and Cortland Sutton. They're both at plus money. And as long as one of them comes through, you're net positive, at least on those bets, right? They're both at plus money. Sutton's 145. Troy Franklin is plus 170. I will ultimately be looking to play both of them, but the Troy Franklin one is the one that I'm using for the FanDuel TD jackpot. If we look back to last week again, or I should say on the season overall, Troy Franklin actually leads the team with 11 red zone targets, and Cortland Sutton is at 6. We look to Troy Franklin. We flip this over to Denver real quick for his red zone target share. It's up at 32%, and Cortland Sutton is at 17%. This is not to say that Cortland Sutton isn't a great option for TD, but we do often see Bo Nix looking to Troy Franklin. Evan Ingram, also a very, very viable option for a touchdown. When you look at the touchdown market, Dobbins, Sutton, Franklin, Harvey, Ingram, realistically, 3 of those guys should be coming through. That's what I would ultimately say. Like, they're 8.5-point favorites. We're dealing with a 42.5 total. We should be getting 3-ish touchdowns out of Denver. 3 of those 5 guys should be coming through. The wild card would be, do we get someone? Maybe it's Denver defense because Geno loves to throw picks. We did see the Broncos, at least according to Adam Schefter, they elevated Mercedes Lewis from the practice squad to the active squad. He's 41 years old or whatever it is. They just signed him the other week. So maybe they give him just one red zone look, but ultimately that's not something you should be putting a main play on. Sutton, Franklin are absolutely my 2 favorites. When it comes to other props that Dobbins rushing yards, Joe was asking, kind of transitioning right to there. I don't have a specific play on his yardage total, but what I like is Dobbins' longest rush over 15.5. That's 15.5. It's juiced minus 130 to the over on FanDuel. It's 16.5 on DK. It's juiced a little bit to the under. If we look at Dobbins, his long rushes of 16, 17, 19, 23, 25, and 41 this season. And when it comes to explosive run play rate, which are runs of 15-plus yards, Denver is second in the league on the season at 8.2%. And over the last 4 weeks, that number increases to 9.3%. So they have this explosive run potential between Dobbins and RJ Harvey, their rookie. And the Raiders have allowed a long run of at least 14 yards in 6 of their 8 games. Now, 14 yards is not 16 yards, and we need the 16 yards to get over 15.5. But the Raiders are at least susceptible to running backs of close to that number. So I'm willing to play Dobbins at home as the lead back in a really controlled game script, which is what the 8.5-point spread is indicating, that Denver will be out in front leading. I'm taking that as a sign that Dobbins will be able to run the ball. He will wear them down, and he will break at least one of those off. So I like Dobbins specifically over 15.5 for his longest rush. If you want to play him straight up on the 70, over 70.5, I think that is certainly fine as well. Again, if things go according to plan for Denver, Dobbins and Harvey both should be rushing the ball at a good rate, given the 8.5-point spread, given the defense on the other side. The Raiders' run defense, I will say, it's right around the league average. It's not terrible. It's not some defense that we could see Dobbins and Harvey both going 100 for, but Dobbins should be able to get to his number. So again, Cortland Sutton, I think he's due for a very clear bounce back game today, given the fact that very slow week for him last week. And again, difficult matchup going up against Derek Stingley Jr. I think he's in for a bounce back. I like Cortland Sutton over 54.5 receiving yards. I like Troy Franklin for a touchdown. I'm using the FanDuel TD jackpot promo on Troy Franklin. I think Cortland Sutton is also a fine option for that as well. And then looking to Dobbins over 15.5 for his longest rush. Genty, longest rush over 11.5. It seems low. The Raiders' offensive line is bad. They have, you look at all the stats for Genty in terms of yards before contact, absolutely terrible. Their offensive line is in shambles. It's a low number. There's no doubt about it. It's 11.5. I doubt you could find a 10.5. Just check over on DK. Frankly, if you gave me a 10.5, and even if it had some juice on that, I may be more interested in that. Let's see. DK for longest rush. It's also 11.5. DK is 11.5, minus 130 to the over, and FanDuel is 11.5. It's minus 114 on both sides. So I don't hate it, but it's certainly not my favorite play when it comes to this slate overall. Again, Dobbins 15.5 over is certainly my favorite, at least when it comes to rushing. Looking to Cortland Sutton over 54.5, 55.5, whatever that might be. So we can continue to talk about Thursday Night Football. Any question that you guys have, I can certainly take them. Again, tomorrow we can focus. I'll be hosting a show tomorrow for anyone else that has joined since we started, but I will also be hosting tomorrow. Tomorrow we really can focus on the entire Sunday slate, start things off early with an international game between the Colts and the Falcons. We can run through all of those games, what I like, what I don't like. There's only one NBA game tonight between the Clippers and the Suns. It's a 2.5, 3-point line, 223.5, 224. We know that Kawhi Leonard's out. We know that James Harden is out. Tomorrow there's a full slate of NBA games for the NBA Cup. So we can run through all of those. We also have 9 NHL games tonight. So if we can run through some of those, I can take your questions on that. There are certainly a lot of things that I like when it comes to the NHL. NHL is one of my favorite sports. I know it's not a big thing for everybody, but truly do love the NHL. And I think there are some really good spots to attack. Some of these, what's the Rockets at to win the championship? I guess we could absolutely talk about futures. We could talk about anything between today and tomorrow. Rockets are now at 22-1. They are tied with the Timberwolves, the Magic. Those are at 22-1. The Clippers are right behind them, 25. 76ers also at 25-1. Slow start for the Rockets. They turn things around pretty quickly. Obviously, I don't want to say the loss of Fred VanVleet, obviously, because it happened over the summer. It's not like they started the season and like we knew this when game 1 happened for them that, VanVleet wasn't going to be there. But I'm just interested in what they do via trade to potentially, I don't want to say remedy that again, because they had the lineup set coming into the season knowing that he was going to be out. But do they make another move in the, leading up to the trade deadline to kind of at least bolster their depth? I will say from a futures perspective in the NBA, I'll just be perfectly honest, I have no NBA futures at this point, but the Bucks at 40-1 is, I think it's a crazy number. When you have Giannis, who could arguably be the best player in the world, when you have them at 40-1, I think that's just an insane number. And there have been plenty of rumors about Giannis wanting to leave. Is he going to ask for the trade request? Is he not going to ask for it? Are they going to trade him? They signed both of his brothers again, whatever it might be. Like a part of me thinks that the Bucks may need to make aggressive moves at the trade deadline to go like all chips to the middle, just in order to like appease Giannis and say like, hey, like don't leave us. We are trying. Like the Dame thing didn't work out a couple of years ago, but we're still going to go make another big splash in free trade deadline or free agency. I guess it would be only trade deadline for this future. But the point being, like, they have to be aggressive in order to, retain Giannis at any point. So, yes, Alperen Şengün and Amin Thompson, they're playing great right now. They are certainly looking very strong. What goalie saves number do you like tonight? Honestly, that's not a market I bet into a lot. I will say there is some high correlation of what we could be looking at in terms of teams that like to shoot the puck a ton and then look to goalies who should be making a ton of saves. My mind immediately goes to the Canes, Carolina Hurricanes, who shoot the puck a ton, as they have really ever since Rod Brindamore took over. They are one of the teams that are very high in the league when it comes to Corsi, which is an advanced NHL stat, which is really just shot attempts. That's what Corsi means. They are shot attempts created. They're always out. I think they're number 2 in the league right now. Colorado's number 1. But Philip Gustafson is sitting at 28.5 for the Wild. He is confirmed as the goalie tonight. It's minus 112 to the over, minus 118 to the under, but they really should be just firing the puck a ton. That's just been their MO for years and years at this point. They like to shoot the puck a ton. I will say in that game, I do like Seth Jarvis over 2.5 shots. He's been off to a hot start this season. It's over 2.5 shots. I got it at minus 135. Seth Jarvis for the Carolina Hurricanes really do like that spot for them tonight. I will say the Montreal Canadiens are taking on the Devils tonight. That over-under has kind of bounced around. It was 6.5 earlier this morning. It dropped down to 5.5. It was 5.5 minus 132 or so on the over. It's now minus 142 on the over. We really should see offense between these two teams. The Habs and the Devils are off to great starts this year. These are two of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Goal scoring should be front and center tonight. So minus 142 is a good bit of juice. I would say, of course, shop for the best lines available. Most books don't really post flat sixes anymore. It's either going to be 5.5 or it's going to be 6.5. I very rarely, if ever, see a flat six anymore. So, you take that for what it will. I do like the over. It's minus 142 at this point, at least over on FanDuel. On DK, I believe it is at 6.5. Let's just check this real quick. I do expect goals tonight, but obviously we want to be betting into the best line. It's 6.5 at DK, and it is juiced a little bit to the under. Ovechkin has gotten under 3.5 shots on goal every game this season. Riders List sports books adjust. That is a great example of not just Ovechkin, but there's certain players who hold name brand value that the books just have a high line, right? They Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith and Jigba this year for Seattle, LeBron, Giannis, et cetera, et cetera. Like the list goes on in every sport. Joe was saying the Caesar over 6. I assume you're referring to Montreal and New Jersey. I think over 6 is fine. Obviously, you are in a spot to always get a push, which is never a bad thing. Get your bet back. But, to this point about Ovechkin has gone under 3.5, books are always going to have like a de facto tax on high-profile players. Like the line's always going to be just a touch higher than we would naturally anticipate it. Again, star players hold this gravitas essentially in all sports. Like we're never going to get cheap numbers on Pat Mahomes. Like even when they were down receivers, even when their offense is bad, we're never going to get like a 230 number on Mahomes. It's always going to be in that 260, 270 range just because they're never going to hang low numbers because it's just risk aversion for them overall. So again, shoot your questions in here about Thursday Night Football. We already touched on that at the beginning of the show. Anyone who joined late, again, like Cortland Sutton over 54.5, 55.5 receiving yards. J.K. Dobbins over 15.5 for his longest rush, and then Troy Franklin for a touchdown using the FanDuel TD jackpot. Looking at some other games on tonight's NHL slate, there are some good games. There are some absolutely disgusting games on tonight's slate. Flyers, Predators is terrible. It's a 5.5 total. These teams don't score. They're relatively good on defense. No interest there. Ducks Stars is really interesting. The Ducks are off to an absolutely blazing start this season. I was trying to find some, numbers that I like, props that I liked, at least from the Ducks side of things, because, Cutter Gauthier, as the screen resets, we're good. Not a real window. It's a picture. But Cutter Gauthier for the Ducks has been off to an amazing start this season. He's piling up the shots every single night. He's scoring goals. He's coming off a hat trick. But his lines are adjusted to 3.5. We're not getting 2.5s anymore on him. I don't mind Mikko Rantanen on the Stars, their high-profile trade that they got from last year along with the signing. I don't mind him over 2.5 shots, minus 120 over on DK. It was minus 122 on FanDuel. I know it's not a big difference, but, trying to get the best lines in every single spot that we possibly can. So that's really it for the NHL. Lightning, Golden Knights, no interest in tonight. Panthers, Kings, don't have any interest there. Again, Flyers, Preds is a terrible game. You could look to the Caps and Penguins just because that's, again, kind of a high-profile Crosby versus Ovechkin capture on the second night of a back-to-back. The Penguins are off to a good start. Malkin's putting up plenty of points. You could certainly look there. I just don't have a feel for the Senators, Bruins. I think the Bruins are kind of due for a loss. I think they've been playing over their head. The Senators are still without Brady Tkachuk. I don't like the Blues-Sabres game. It's kind of gross overall. The Blues are playing absolutely terribly right now. They're sitting one of their best players, Jordan Kyrou, tonight, and the Sabres are just an average team when it's all said and done. The Stars' money line, it depends on, do you like laying that kind of price at minus 192? If we're, again, looking just in a bubble, I would say that I would look to the Stars to win in regulation, which is the 60-minute money line. It's called the three-way money line. They have to win the game in regulation. If it goes to overtime and shootout and they win it, you still lose your bet. They have to win in the 60 minutes. So the 60-minute money line is minus 130. It's significantly better than minus 192. You are shortening your window to win. You do not have overtime or shootout, but you are getting significantly better odds. So that's the kind of balance that you're looking for. Do you want to lay a minus 192 price? Are you kind of looking for, as people like to say, a parlay partner? Are you looking for the Stars to add them to something else? And then therefore you get close to even money, what have you. I think the Stars are in a good spot tonight. I will say they're off to an okay-ish start this season. I know they have had plenty of success in recent years, going to conference finals year after year, but a new coach, a little bit rocky start. Hey, if it's a parlay for other things, yes, I think using the Stars money line is straightforward tonight, minus 192. You're going to pair it with something else to get a little bit closer to even money. They should be coming away with the win. The Ducks, like I said, have been exceeding my expectations thus far this season, but I think the Ducks are also due for a loss, and we'll see, I would say, a decent amount of scoring in that game. So let's circle back to Thursday night football. Again, 8.5-point spread for the home Broncos, 42.5 total. This number was, the spread was bet up from 6.5, got up to 9.5 at one point. It's back down to 8.5. 43.5 total is down to 42. Again, the wind that they are seeing in Denver right now, at least according to reports, that wind will taper off as we get closer to game time. So anything that you see right now or have seen earlier today about wind gusts 20, 30 miles per hour, that is true for then. Things should taper off as we get closer to game time. We talked a lot about the Raiders offense and what they're going to do after the Jacoby Myers trade, and really Brock Bowers is going to be the main target, as we saw last week. But it really comes down to, what does the pecking order look like after him? And Trey Tucker has been, consistent option in terms of playing time this season, but his production is a little bit up and down. I'm interested to see in what they do with that second receiver, because I do think there's some value. Again, Jack Bech is one of their rookie receivers. His number was 11.5 this morning. That number has been bet up to 15.5. Tyler Lockett's number, the veteran that they signed, a week and a half ago, his number was 16.5 this morning. It's been bet down to 15.5. I like, my initial takeaway is that it's obviously going to be Brock Bowers, number one. He's going to be in a tier of his own. And then it's going to be a bit of a jumbled mix. I would like to say that Trey Tucker takes a clear number two. And then it's going to be like a 3A, 3B between Jack Bech and Michael Mayer, the second tight end. We're actually going to see Mayer continue to play on a high volume of snaps as he did last week. If we flip back over to the Raiders here, last week, Michael Mayer, and really throughout the season, obviously there's games that Brock Bowers missed, but Michael Mayer last week played on 83% of the snaps. Brock Bowers did only play on 81%. Don't worry about that. It's just a one-game thing. Brock Bowers was running around a ton, but Michael Mayer is at least a viable pass-catching option. It's not like he's just a blocking tight end. He has some pass-catching ability. So I think they're going to use two tight end sets a lot. They'll go with two wide receiver sets. They won't go three wide receiver sets too much. So again, it's going to come down, if you like Jack Bech, I do think this is a buy low opportunity for him, where again, the number was 11.5, got bet up to 15.5. Even if the Raiders lose, if Jack Bech has, like, let's just pick a number. Let's say 35 yards tonight, right? 35 yards for Jack Bech tonight. 35 yards is nothing to write home about. Like, that's not breaking the box score. He's 3-4 catches, whatever it is, for 35 yards. Brock Bowers is still up there at the top. But if Jack Bech is 35 yards, even 30 yards, his prop right now is 15.5 after it was 11.5 this morning. He's doubling his prop. So then next week, when the Raiders are constantly going to be playing from behind because they have a bad defense, that Jack Bech number that was 11.5, now it's 15.5 right now. Next week, that number could be 21.5, 22.5, 25.5, whatever it might be. So if you think we're going to be getting a Jack Bech breakout, again, they drafted him for a reason. They drafted Dante Thornton Jr. I know he was inactive last week, but they drafted these guys for a reason. There's a very clear gap in usage in the passing offense for the Raiders with Brock Bowers at the top, Jacoby Myers now gone, Trey Tucker, a bit of a deep ball threat, a little bit of boomer bust option. They need a consistent pass catcher in the underneath. Now, does that come down to Tyler Lockett, who they signed week and a half ago? He played on 30% of the snaps. Last week it was only 19 plays overall. Does that increase just due to his familiarity with Geno and Pete Carroll, and they just want a consistent option in the passing game to pick up first downs when Brock Bowers is covered? Or do they really try and elevate one of these rookie receivers between Bech and Dante Thornton Jr.? We would need to get the actives and inactives to make sure that Dante Thornton Jr. is playing. There's no guarantee that he is. I haven't seen any of his props being posted because he was inactive last week. But again, Bech should be that guy. Mark is asking, do you think Bo does a lot of running tonight? It comes down to what you mean by a lot of running. His prop is sitting at 20.5. The script for him to have a lot of runs and or scrambles would mean that, generally speaking, the Broncos have to pass the ball, which means that their game's close and or they're playing from behind, obviously with Max Crosby bringing pressure for the Raiders. Bo Nix could be forced out of the pocket. So I don't think there will be too many designed runs for Bo Nix. If he scrambles, it's simply going to be due to the pressure that the Raiders are bringing, and that may mean the game is close. Again, if things go according to plan for the Broncos, it is an 8.5-point spread. They should be leading. They should be handing the ball off to J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. If Bo Nix has to run tonight, I think that means the Raiders are within the number and they're covering and they're keeping this a competitive game. Because as soon as the Broncos get up, I mean, what the Raiders did last week, we can't take as an indication of what they are going to do every week and scoring all those points, especially late. The Jags defense, although it's good, is not the Broncos defense. So the point being is going into, was it halftime or at the end of the third, the Raiders had 6 points, 9 points, whatever it was last week. Then there was an explosion of points in the fourth quarter and overtime. But the point I'm making is that if things go well for the Broncos, they're going to be up 17-3, and therefore Nix doesn't have to run. They won't be in obvious passing situations, allowing Max Crosby to put pressure on Bo Nix and then force him to scramble out of the pocket. So, yeah, like the Broncos are going to bury the Raiders. And if at halftime, if you guys are watching this, and at halftime, we see the score at 17 or 20-3 or 17-6. Is anyone going to be shocked? Is anyone going to be shocked that Geno throws 1 or 2 picks? The final score of this game ends up like 24-10, and it really wasn't competitive at all. I mean, I'm not going to say it's what we saw when the Broncos took on the Bengals and Jake Browning was still starting for the Bengals, and it was a complete mess. And they scored 3 points in that game, if I remember correctly, and they just blew them out. And so I'm not going to say it's going to be that far, but I think it's going to be somewhere close enough where the Broncos should win this game 24-10, 27-13. I really don't think on a short week traveling into altitude, the Raiders are going to put up a significant fight. This is not a spot where, they're on upset. The Broncos are an upset alert. There's also a case to be made that the Broncos just don't know or don't like to try until the third quarter or the fourth quarter. So if you are buying into that, then yeah, maybe Bo Nix does have to run a lot tonight because their offense is just inept at times. I don't know how you get to halftime and you have like 20 yards passing. So that's a different story. But I really don't think Bo Nix will need to run a lot tonight just because the Broncos should be in control of this game. So again, some of my favorite bets tonight: Sutton over 54.5 receiving yards, 55.5. It's been bet up a little bit. I think that is a very clear bounce back spot for him. I don't look at last week's game as I don't look at last week's game for Cortland Sutton and be like, oh, he was bad last week. I look at it and be like, well, he saw Derek Stingley Jr. on, I forget the exact number. It was like 90+% of the routes he ran. So I'm not worried about Cortland Sutton. I know he's awesome. So Sean is saying Geno under 11.5 rush yards seems like a gimme. If Geno is forced to drop back 35 times because the Raiders are down by multiple scores, again, I won't see this as Geno. They're like, Geno may have to run because Nick Bonito is chasing him all around and the Raiders are in obvious passing situations. Therefore, Denver can bring the blitz and Geno has to scramble out of the pocket because the receivers aren't getting open. So I know, like, you're like, oh, Geno's not a running quarterback. Like, he doesn't have big numbers when you look at his game log, but he may have to just scramble out of the pocket. It's like 3 yards here, 4 yards there. He's dropping back 35 times, and all of a sudden he gets to 15. But it's not like he was running the ball because that's what the Raiders chose to do. It's like he had to get out of the way, so he's not taking sacks. So I see it as very, like, Geno will either end with 0 or he'll end with 25. That's why I don't like the number. I generally don't bet rushing quarterback props unless it's a very clear situation and or quarterbacks have a lot of designed runs for them. So I think the Knicks number is fine. The Geno number, I just have no interest in ultimately. If I had to play anything, it might just be the under or pass. That's where I would look. So, yeah, Sutton saw very difficult coverage last week against Houston. I don't look back at the game log from him and be like, oh, he was bad last week. I'd say that's a very clear situation where the Houston defense is great and they just locked him up. So you wouldn't be to see Aiden O'Connell for the Raiders. That is that's quite a take. Let's see Geno's minus 170 to throw an interception tonight. That is like, when you look at and trying to like build correlation between bets, like Geno, what's his attempt number at? Pass attempts, 32.5. So again, they're 8.5 point underdogs. It's 2 possessions. He is expected to drop back 32, 33 times against a good defense. The volume of times that he has to throw the ball if they are trailing will put him at risk for an interception. That's why he is minus 170. Frankly, I would never play the minus 170 if you are buying into, oh, he's going to throw a pick, but I don't like that number at minus 170. A part of me wants to say Denver defensive touchdown at plus 500. And now this would just be like a very small sprinkle on a Denver defensive touchdown at plus 500, because if he is throwing the ball this much and he is minus 170 to throw a pick, that would imply that it may happen. And if it does happen, I think Denver defense would be in a good spot to run it back. So again, this really comes down to like how you personally bet, what you personally like, or you just want to like a little fun bet. It's like, oh, Denver defense at plus 500 and put a very small sprinkle on this because, oh, Geno's expected to throw a pick. So therefore they may run one back. Who do you like for most rushing yards or most receiving yards? Okay, so these are always interesting, game specials. A lot of people call these, or the books have them listed as the Triple Crown bets, like most passing, most rushing, most receiving, whatever it might be. The most receiving, I think a lot of people will be looking to Sutton. Frankly, I would go against that, and I would look to Troy Franklin. And again, this is not to say that I don't like Courtland Sutton. As I said, my favorite bet of this game is Courtland Sutton over 54.5 receiving yards. But I would just try and go against what I presume to be chalk. Let me just check this on DK if they have that listed for most in the game. Most receiving yards in the game. See, Sutton's at plus 250. And again, that makes sense just based on his stats and based on where the book's going to put the number. But Troy Franklin's at plus 425. So although I do think it could be Bowers or Sutton, I'd rather take a shot on a longer number at plus 425 rather than bet into what I perceive to be or what I call chalky numbers. So that's what I would do that. And Dobbins is the very clear answer for rushing. I assume his number's not going to be anything bettable. Most rushing yards is plus 170. Like, I would never bet that. I do think he will absolutely come through. It would be a shock to me to see RJ Harvey had the most rushing yards in the game. So I wouldn't bet plus 700 for RJ Harvey. I wouldn't bet minus 170 for Dobbins. If you do think Dobbins has the most rushing yards in the game, instead of going to minus 170, this is how we work around things. Instead of saying, okay, if he has the most rushing yards in the game at minus 170, his prop is sitting at 69.5 or 70.5. why don't you just alt him up, right? Instead of saying he has the most rushing yards a game with minus 170, why don't you just alt Dobbins up to 80 yards at plus 141, 90 yards at plus 220, or 100 yards at plus 330. Like, that's what you're betting on. You're betting for Dobbins to exceed. Now, obviously, there are scenarios where Dobbins has 50 yards, Genti has 40, RJ Harvey has 30, and Dobbins doesn't go over his number. He doesn't hit the alts, but he still leads the game in rushing, and the minus 170 would cash. Yes, there are scenarios for all these things. Do I like betting the minus 170 number? No. And again, this comes down to your personal propensity of what you like to do, how you like to bet, how you approach certain games, what type of exposure you want to a game, how you allocate units, bankroll. That is a very personal thing. What I do, what you do, what your best friend does may be drastically different than you. Again, personal preference. I personally would rather just take a small unit and say, instead of betting on the minus 170 at Dobbins to lead the game in rushing, I'm not going to bet as just over 69.5 or over 70.5. I may throw a sprinkle on 80 plus or 90 plus. I get that plus money and go from there. And whatever happens, happens. I'm handicapping the game in terms of the usage of J.K. Dobbins, the game script in terms of them being 8.5-point favorites. And again, especially the rush, as I talked about for Dobbins. Let me get these notes real quick. Because I talked about Dobbins over 15.5 for longest rush. Again, he has longest rushes. When it comes to explosive run rate, which runs at 15 plus yards, Denver is second in the league on the season at 8.2%. And that explosive run rate has gone up to 9.3% over the last 4 weeks. So if he does break off those big runs, he doesn't need to have 30 carries to get to 80 yards. He can do that in, half that. Dobbins has had 28 carries for 198 yards and has scored 1 touchdown, 2 games against the Raiders in his career, 7.1 yards per carry. Yes, that is true. Historical stats are great. I would say make sure we use those in the proper context, pre-injury, post-injury, working with different teams, Chargers, Ravens, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes players just have it. Sometimes players just have another team's number. All your favorite teams, you probably have another player on your rival team that has just constantly berated them for years and years and years. And we all know it. And sometimes players just have another team's number. So again, when it comes to leading the game in rushing yards, receiving yards, there are alternate ways to go about what you believe in. Again, if you truly believe Dobbins has a huge game, Uncle Ted, you've been saying, Denver smokes the Raiders tonight, right? Well, that means Dobbins is probably in for a big game. And you're also saying that, Harvey only had 2 carries last week. And it's not just last week. RJ Harvey may be scoring touchdowns, but he's not playing a big role in the offense overall. So, yeah, smokes them. So if you believe in this, it's probably, hey, Dobbins is doing his thing. He's handling business. So, again, this is all dating back to the question of what Kay asked, who I like for the most receiving yards or most rushing yards. The Dobbins number, at least on DK right now, is minus 170. I don't want to bet minus 170. I want to find an alternate route, and that would mean alting Dobbins to 80 plus, 90 plus, 100 plus, whatever it might be, of what you are expecting for this game. So I think we're in for, I don't want to say a classic Thursday night game, but the 8.5-point spread and a lower 42.5 total doesn't bring me warm, fuzzy feelings of this is going to be a shootout. We're going to be in for a great game. Props are going to be flying over left and right. I think there are some very clear spots to attack. I wouldn't go crazy with this game. There are far better games that I like on the Sunday slate. And again, I will be hosting the show tomorrow for, again, same hour, 5 to 6 tomorrow. We can go through the entire Sunday slate. Tomorrow we have a full NBA slate tomorrow because of the NBA Cup games, and we have some NHL to mix in there as well. It's only the one NBA game tonight, 9 NHL games, and we'll take care of business. Ariel trusts me to host the show when she's away, so we'll do that. I'll answer your questions. We'll talk through the games. Obviously, tomorrow, as we get more and more props posted, that will help. As we get injury reports for all the teams, that will help for everything, as it always does. Seeing running backs not practicing on Wednesday doesn't like James Cook didn't practice yesterday, if I remember correctly, or was limited in practice, whatever it was, for the Bills. Like, it's Wednesday. Like, that doesn't really matter to me too much. If he doesn't practice today, he doesn't practice on Friday, that's far more important. That obviously is going to impact in props, what we're expecting from the Bills and their scoring potential overall, all those sorts of things. And that's just really something I've always done, always paying attention to injury reports as the week develops, especially and when it comes to veterans. Like, seeing weeks, I should say, with Devontae Adams not practicing or a veteran receiver not practicing, I don't care. Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday, if he's limited, doesn't matter. Once we hit Friday, is he good to go? Do we get a report saying he's listed as questionable, but he will 100% play? Like, that's what really matters. That's what impacts props. That's what impacts how we are evaluating games and on what the offense is going to do or not be able to do in a given week, in a given matchup. So again, they do practice Fridays, all you care about. Exactly. Like, someone not practicing on Wednesday or being limited in practice Wednesday, Thursday, so be it. That's it. It just is what it is. And we'll break all that down tomorrow. Again, first look at the Sunday slate. We talked about this in terms of the survivor pool, which was asked at the start. I believe it was by Mark. He was asking about the Bears overall. And I said, yeah, like, the Bears should be winning that game against the Giants, who are, clearly lacking offensive talent. And I know the Bears defense has not been good, especially the past few weeks. But, part of me wants to say, I think the Bears can just outscore the Giants, right? That's really what it comes down to. I can see the Bears going out there and scoring 30 plus. I think the Giants could get to 21 plus. I don't know if the Giants can get to 30 plus. So I would look to that. We can talk through. Dart is insane. Dart's been fantastic. He really has. And I think next year the Giants are going to be that offseason team that everyone wants to buy into. Like, they had a great draft. Signing Russell Wilson was a mistake, and then drafting Dart, you do one or the other. But Dart, awesome. But going into next year, the summer next year, they're gonna be like, oh, Cam's back, Neighbors is back. Dart is going to take another step forward in terms of the offense. The Giants are going to be that popular underdog-ish team next summer. I can already see. So that is going to be a start with firing table. Listen. I'm not a Giants fan. I think he should have been gone years ago. That's just me. So plenty to get to in terms of the Sunday slate, in terms of injuries evolving, in terms of teams and their offensive usage changing, given some trades that we saw around the league. Different quarterbacks coming back, different quarterbacks hurt, different quarterbacks not playing, Kyler Murray going on IR, teams coming off a bye. I'm interested to see what the Buccaneers do with their offense going up against the Pats, given the fact that, both Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin weren't seen in practice or weren't practicing. They are coming off their bye. The Pats defense has been solid. Drake May has been fantastic for the Pats this season. They're moving the ball, they're scoring. Do we get Ramondre Stevenson back for the Pats? We saw Travion Henderson play a big role for them last week, or I should say an elevated role for them last week when Stevenson didn't play. How much of that continues? They are going up against a tough run defense in the Buccaneers. What do we see from the Cardinals going up against the Seahawks? Cardinals coming off a big win on Monday night. Obviously, we know that Kyler's going on IR. It's going to be the Jacoby Brissett show moving forward. Marv Harrison's coming off a big game. JSN in Seattle absolutely torched the Commanders on Sunday night. JSN's having an unbelievable season. How much of that continues, but also they need to mix in Rashid Shaheed, who they traded for with the Saints earlier in the week. Will Cooper Kupp play? Even if he does play, I don't think it's that much of an issue. Torrey Horton is having an elevated role for the Seahawks. So how do they mix the dynamic of JSN's our guy. He's having an amazing season. We just traded for this wide receiver. We want to get him involved in the offense, but we also still want to facilitate, getting Torrey Horton more involved, who I do think is legit good. And obviously there are two running backs that they have. And there are storylines across the league that we can break down. And again, when it comes to player usage, which is just something that I, truly dive into, truly believe in, this is where we can find value in the prop market. If Kayshon Boutte is out, Pop could pop. Yeah, Pop Douglas has been awesome. Like he scoring touchdowns. Again, they're really their entire offense. Really all the passing options in the offense have been solid. because Drake May has been so solid. All right, so I think that covers it for today. NHL slate, 9 games, only the one NBA game. If you are betting the NBA game, Kawhi's out, James Harden's out. Keep in mind for that. We'll have a full NBA slate tomorrow. We could go with that. What do you think happens with Torrey Horton now with Rashid? Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're still going to see JSN as that guy. Rashid Shaheed obviously has plenty of deep ball potential. I think it's going to be I don't want to say a hot hand or like wide receiver by committee. I know people use that phrase, and it may be true with Seattle, where JSN, we can etch that name into stone every week. And then it's okay, is once Cooper comes back, it's okay, if you pass the Cooper Cup, but does Torrey Horton have the hot hand this week? Is it Rashid Shaheed? Do they continue to mix in AJ Barner and Eric Arroyo, the 2 tight ends, obviously the 2 running backs coming in the backfield? How does that dynamic work? It's just gonna be this jumbled mix, and weeks that Rashid Shaheed pops, he's gonna have 90 plus yards, and he will all through all of his numbers, and you could cash in on that. And the next week, he may be finishing with 2 catches for 25 yards, and it's Torrey Horton week. So I think it may be a bit of a roller coaster for those players, at least in offense. But frankly, from a real life football perspective, that's a good thing. That's a good problem to have. It's hey, it doesn't have to be at this guy every single week outside JSN, but it can feel hey, we mix in this guy, it's Charbonnet, it's Ken Walker, it's this, that. They're all over the place, which is a really good thing from a real life football perspective. But it does make things somewhat, the ambiguity is high with Seattle in terms of their player usage. So that's going to do it for today. Thursday night football. Let's go with Cortland Sutton over 55.5 receiving yards. I know the numbers moved a little bit, but that's what I like. Troy Franklin, TD jackpot on FanDuel. I also like Cortland Sutton for a TD as well. J.K. Dobbins over 15.5 for his longest rush. That's come through. I like Seth Jarvis on the Carolina Hurricanes for over 2.5 shots going up against Minnesota. And again, I like the Devils and Montreal to go over the 5.5. It is juiced at -142. Someone was mentioning that Caesars has a 6 out there. You can always get the push, which is always nice. Not all books offer that. So I would certainly look for that. That does it for today. I'll be back tomorrow. Again, same time, 5 p.m. We will run through all of the NBA Cup games tomorrow, a little bit of NHL, and we'll focus on the NFL Sunday slate, all games, starting early with the international game in Berlin between the Colts, who are in need of a bounce-back game, and the Falcons. So thanks to you guys. Thanks for the questions. Always good to interact with you guys. I'll be back tomorrow. Same situation, same time, 5 p.m. Good luck with your bets tonight, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.